शृणुयाम देवाः। भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः। स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः। व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः। स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः। स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः। स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। अचिन्त्यमव्यक्तमनन्तरूपं शिवं प्रशान्तममृतं ब्रह्मयोनिम् तथादिमध्यान्तविहीनमेकं विभुं चिदानन्दमरूपमद्भुतम्। उमासहायं परमेश्वरं प्रभुं त्रिलोचनं नीलकण्ठं प्रशान्तम्। ध्यात्वा मुनिर्गच्छति भूतयोनिं समस्तसाक्षिं तमसः परस्तात्। स ब्रह्मा स शिवः सेन्द्रः सोऽक्षरः परमस्वराट्। स एव विष्णुः स प्राणः स कालोऽग्निः स चन्द्रमाः। स एव सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यं सनातनम्। ज्ञात्वा तं मृत्युमत्येति नान्यः पन्था विमुक्तये। सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना। आत्मानमरणिं कृत्वा प्रणवं चोत्तरारणिम्। ज्ञाननिर्मथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पण्डितः। स एव माया परिमोहितात्मा शरीरमास्थाय करोति सर्वम्। स्त्रियन्नपानादिविचित्रभोगैः स एव जाग्रत् परितृप्तिमेति। स्वप्ने सजीवः सुखदुःखभोक्ता स्वमायया कल्पितविश्वलोके। सुषुप्तिकाले सकले विलीने तमोभिभूतः सुखरूपमेति। पुनश्च जन्मान्तरकर्मयोगात् स एव जीवः स्वपिति प्रबुद्धः। पुरत्रये क्रीडति यश्च जीवस्ततस्तु जातं सकलं विचित्रम्। आधारमानन्दमखण्डबोधं यस्मिन् लयं याति पुरत्रयं च। एतस्माज्जायते प्राणो मनः सर्वेन्द्रियाणि च। खं वायुर्ज्योतिरापः पृथिवी विश्वस्य धारिणी।
Mantras 9, 10 and 11 form a thought sequence with reference to what is the means of attaining the ultimate self. Mantra 9 says that the only way for self-realization is gaining of the knowledge of the self. Just as fire is the only means for cooking, there is no other way for liberation except to know Him. Him here refers to the self. Having known Him, one transcends death. There is no other way for liberation. There is no other way for liberating yourself from the delusion of what you have seen as a snake except the knowledge of the rope. Till such point, any other thing that you do, you cannot say that you are completely liberated. Similarly, the entire liberation for a person from his dream world comes through the knowledge of the waking state. So it is the knowledge which is the ultimate liberator. But what exactly is the process? The process is described in mantra 10, and that invoking of the self from within is described in mantra 11. So we will chant mantra 10 twice.
सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना.
By perceiving the self in all beings and all beings in the self, one reaches the Supreme Brahman not by any other means. The previous mantra also said, Na anya panta vimuktaye, there is no other way to liberation. This mantra also says that not by any other means. It is not a contradiction. If you look at carefully both these things, they are connected. But before that, this famous line in this mantra, Sarva Bhutastam Atmanam Sarva Bhutani Chatmani, you will find this sort of verbatim, this verse, or somewhat equivalent to this, repeated in many places. Recently in the Ishavasya Upanishad we did this. You remember this? In Ishavasya Upanishad, go back to mantra 6, you will find exactly the same words. In mantra 6 it says, Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyeva anupashyati sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam tatona vijugupsati. Exactly the same words. Sarvani bhutani atmanyeva anupashyati sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam. Here sarva bhutastam atmanam sarva bhutani cha atmani. Verbatim the same words. It is there. That is why we said when it comes to the ultimate truth, the Upanishads are all concurring on the same point. We really do not know what is the period of this Upanishad or that Upanishad, what is the connection between this Rishi and that Rishi. But when it comes to the ultimate truth, it is the same. Interestingly, in Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of Upanishads only, in the Gita Dhyanam, it is said that Sarvo Upanishado Gaho Dogda Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gita Amritam Mahal. If the Upanishads is the cow, the milk that we get from the cow is the Gita. So it is the Upanishad thoughts that has come as essence in Gita. In Upanishad, in the Gita, not just the message, certain verses are verbatim also quoted from the Upanishads. Particularly in second chapter where we find Atma Vidya is there, very many verses from Kathopanishad comes. And the 70th verse of second chapter, the river and ocean example, it is taken from the Mundaka Upanishad, which we will see in the future. And then verse 29 of chapter 6. Chapter 6 talks about Dhyana Yoga, meditation, and the culmination finally happens and the process is given in verse 28. And next to that, when he is talking about the vision of such an enlightened person, he uses the same verse there. Chapter 6 verse 29 says, Sarva Bhutastamatmanam Sarva Bhutani Chatmani. So this is a very famous sort of a thought that is given, and it is repeated again and again for us to get rooted in this. Now, mantra 9 said that the knowledge of the self is the purifier, is the liberator. So what is the process? The subjective experience that a person gets upon realization, he becomes the perceiver of oneness. If you go back to mantra 6 and 7 in Ishavasya Upanishad, very close and similar thought flow between these two mantras, and we said there is only a very small and subtle difference. So, according to Swamiji's interpretation, Mantra 6 is talking about a person who has virtually unified himself with the universe and he has crossed the extrinsic illusion by the process of that unification. And in the Mantra 7, where his final merger is complete and he has crossed the intrinsic illusion also, he becomes Ekatvam Anupashyata. That means he becomes the perceiver of oneness, completely enlightened person. Now, for an enlightened person to see the entire beings in his self, and his self is the entire beings, it is obviously the state. There is absolutely no doubt or no questions about it. But in this mantra, the translation, if you carefully read, he says, by perceiving the self in all beings and all beings in the self, then one reaches the supreme Brahman, not by any other means. So therefore, this is also taken as a process by which you reach that state. See, all the mantras in the Upanishad and generally in the Shastras, all verses just do not declare about what the final state is. They also very clearly give the path to reach that state. Now, when you say that there is no other means to liberation except by awakening to the knowledge of the self, that is a correct statement and that is a general declaration of truth that is made. But the question is, how do you gain that knowledge? The gaining of that knowledge, which is a subjective apprehension, has to come only by a emotional connection where you are able to see yourself in all beings and all beings in yourself. Now, the seeing yourself in all beings and all beings in the self, which is a very, as I said, a very famous sort of practice that is given, we really do not understand it in its essence what it is. So therefore, go back to your experience of dream. When a person has actually woken up from the dream, if he reflects what that erstwhile dream is, it is the waker's mind which was there in all beings, correct? The entire beings of the dream is nothing but the waker's mind only. And all the beings, where were they? They were in the waker's mind only. So if you get into each and every being and find out what the root is, that is waker's mind. And all the beings, where are they overall? They are also in waker's mind only. So it is nothing but that oneness which has created that plurality. In that plurality, you dig deeper into it, you will find that same principle only operating. And in the overall beings are there contained in that whole principle. This is the lucky that we have got this example of dream to compare. Now, this is understandable only upon waking up. While in the dream, we are not able to conceive this, we are not able to understand this. In dream, I am just a separate individual who is the subject in the dream. All other persons are whoever I experience, they are the objects in the dream for me. Not just the beings, all the inert objects also. I have a dream wife, dream child and a dream flora and fauna, dream sun and moon. Everything else is separate from me. I confine myself to the subject in the dream. Now imagine, this you have to imagine, a guru comes into the dream from the waking state. It is not possible, just imagine. A guru comes into the dream and he says, what you are undergoing is a dream experience. In reality, you are a different person. And slowly you start developing faith and Shraddha in him and you say that I believe you. So he says you have to wake up and understand yourself. You are only one sleeping. There is no other beings that you see here in the form that you are seeing. It is all not there. You are just one entity who is happily sleeping. You have to just wake up. So therefore then you ask, what is the process? Again I repeat, there is a limitation of the example because dream state to waking state and waking state to dream state, all these are natural process. But just extend your imagination and try to cope with the example. Try to cooperate with that example. If the dream guru were to say that you have to visualize that this entire dream is nothing but one entity only. You have to start connect. In other words, what happens in the present state of mind, I am extremely different from others is the feeling that I have. That I am separate and others are separate. And all this is happening because there is a strong sense of individuality or the ego that I have rooted myself in. I firmly believe myself to be this body, mind and intellect, and I have confined myself to this small personality. Therefore, the boundary that I have created for myself like this has automatically created the other side, which is the entire world, and each and every individual is completely separate from me. This is the strong notion that I carry. And in this notion only, all my other feelings are generated. Once this separation is created, my desire for the other objects, if I get the desire, there is a greed. If I don't get the desire, anger, various other emotions which are all created. All these emotions are created, and the effects of the emotions, which is grief, which is delusion, everything is created because of this separation only. In that very act of separation, the moment I create a duality, and duality further manifests into plurality, in that very moment I am creating a separation from the world, and the separation is actually causing all the distress. And therefore I become bound. So when he says you want liberation, you have to only wake up, and that wake up does not happen automatically like dream to waking world here. We need to first get into that feeling of oneness. See, there is a beautiful virtuous cycle of growth where this knowledge and feeling promote each other. We are in state of ignorance where we consider ourselves to be separate. There is a guru who enters our life and he says, there is only one thing. You are the self. That is the knowledge that he gives there. Unless otherwise this knowledge is given, we are just confined to our small circle of identification and ego, maybe me and my family, that's where we are operating. To expand beyond that, we need to have this knowledge of oneness, but mere knowledge at the intellectual level doesn't take us anywhere. It has to percolate down to the feeling level. Therefore, that feeling has to be generated that you are able to see each and every other being as your own self and your own self as each and every other being. To take an example, when you stand in front of a mirror, or let us say a room has many mirrors on all sides, like a mirror palace in those days, and you see your reflection on all sides of the mirror, do you feel anybody other than you there? It is just a reflection on all sides, right? That is even though you see various entities, there may be infinite images that you see there, you don't get a feeling that they are all separate, because there is a internal understanding that they are all my reflections. Imagine if a unintelligent dog or a sparrow enters that room. When the dog jumps, every other dog jumps in the mirror. When the dog is barking, every other dog is barking. So this dog is treating every other dog as its enemy or competitor or something like that. And finally it gets exhausted and it falls down. Exactly like that, if we are at the level of ignorance, we are actually seeing each and every other person not as our own reflection, but as some other entity. So one entity is a friend, one entity is an enemy, one entity is a neutral person or a relative or this or that. This is the various feelings that we have created. And based on this relationship, our bonds of emotions are quite varying and fluctuating, goes through ups and downs, because of which we go through ups and downs. Now, if this knowledge by percolating into our system, if you are able to convert that into the feeling at the emotional level, the one feeling which is opposed to all other feelings, which is a bond of love. See, remember this, that every emotion has to have minimum two entities. There is a person who is from whom the emotions are flowing, and to the person to whom the emotions are directed. Any emotion. And these emotions are positive and negative. Negative emotions like anger, jealousy, etc., it's very clear to understand. And these type of emotions create further and further distance away from each other. The only emotions where the lover and the beloved are brought together, the two is actually going to become one, is the emotion of love. And this emotion of love is taking various names in various relationships. Friendship is also love. The relationship between husband and wife is also love. Guru and Shishya is also love. In some place you call bhakti. Between Bhakta and Bhagavan it's called bhakti, devotion, but it's also love. It is, when it is flowing higher, we call it devotion. So this devotion or bhakti or love is the same emotion, but this emotion is actually making both the entities come together. Swami Ramtirtha says, love is this law of attraction due to love is the exact force that is operating at the physical level in the form of law of gravitation. Law of gravitation actually is, physics says that each and every object is pulling each other object, and there is a force. That force is directly proportional to the mass and inversely proportional to the distance between them. This is a physics law, and it is actually happening at the physical level. We are not able to see the forces at the physical level amongst us because there is a very big Earth's gravitational force which is under operation. That's about all. Otherwise, this force is happening. Exactly like that, internally, this force is constantly happening. When the distance is near, see, why are you able to feel more oneness with the family members, or where the mother feels one with the child? In the case of mother-child and natural relationship, it doesn't come with the knowledge, etc. It is there naturally. But the truth is, she is able to feel one with the child, only then there is a love. When a teacher is able to feel one with the student, only then there is a compassion. When the student is able to feel one with the teacher, then there is devotion. So, wherever you are able to bring yourself close, by the virtue of the knowledge of the oneness, the feeling of the oneness automatically flows. In other words, emotion is a spontaneous feeling. Emotion is spontaneous. You cannot try and bring emotions. Any emotion for that matter. Emotion of anger also, emotion of jealousy also, it should automatically come, gurgle from within your bosom. That is called emotion. So this automatic emotion is a effect of your contemplation of the thought that I am one with the others. So this thought of oneness slowly percolates down into the mind and fills it up with this inspiration of feeling of oneness. So when you are able to feel one with others, you are able to see the same self in all beings and all beings in the self. Now, the practical way of actually doing this is, the formula doesn't change. If you are able to direct the emotions to a particular higher entity, all other beings who come under the umbrella of that higher entity, you will have a uniform feeling. This is the way. If you are able to have that absolute feeling of oneness with your Guru, whoever is the disciples or co-students or whoever is under that umbrella of that Guru, there will be automatic camaraderie which will come, and this is a bonding. If you are able to have a strong feeling towards your parent, who is the head of the family, let us say, all other people under that umbrella of the family, there will be a automatic feeling. Please be very careful in understanding what this feeling is. This is a feeling of pure oneness, and pure oneness is, it will reflect as others' joy as my joy and others' sorrow as my sorrow. That is called as love. When I say oneness, it is not a mere intellectual understanding. I love my father, but there's constantly anger and constantly fight and other negative emotions to my father, means you go back to the basics of Vedanta, that it's not pure love. It is your selfish attachment which portrays itself as love. Preferential attachment is not love. Love is when you are able to genuinely take out your selfishness and show that pure feeling. So that is why the knowledge of oneness has to slowly percolate within you. It is different that how you deal with others in karma level at all, but at the feeling level, there need not be any resistance at all. There is every reason for you to support India and feel proud about India and feel one with Indians. But there is no reason for us to hate any other person who is a non-Indian. Let's say a Pakistani or anybody for that matter. But when it comes to dealing with Pakistan, that is a different matter. If a war has to happen, it has to happen, or diplomatic relations has to slow down, you have to slow down. All this is there, how to deal with it. But all this can be done without alteration at the feeling level. So that feeling is the most important thing. Swami Ramtirtha says, if he is telling the Muslims have this pilgrimage to Mecca as a as a very important event in their lifetime. So he says, as metaphorically, instead of taking the land route to Arabia, why don't you take the sea route? It is very easy, he says. Instead of going through the desert, you go by the sea, he says. What it means is, the hard intellect oriented approach towards God is a tough process, and the devotional approach to God is a relatively easy process. When we say this, it is not one divorce from the other, both has to go together. But what it means is, it is that feeling that actually keeps the connection. So when we say, if you are able to keep that feeling, pure feeling upon a particular higher entity, and under whom all are converging, to them it will flow automatically. It is exactly the same thing, that if you are able to have that feeling of love for God, under whom everybody will be covered, there will be a universal feeling. So in other words, as far as the dream is concerned, if the dreamer is able to identify with the waker, who is the total entity beyond the dream, then only he will be able to understand that each and every aspect of the dream is nothing but the waker's mind only. Exactly like that, somebody who is transcending this terrestrial world that we are operating now, if you are able to keep your feeling towards that entity, you will be able to achieve this Sarva Bhutastam Atmanam Sarva Bhutani Chatmani. This diagram we have drawn earlier also. You can refer to Ishavasya notes, exactly the same thing. There is this individual and there is this world. There is microcosm and there is this macrocosm. What creates a resistance is the ego. The moment an individuality is created, it forms a fence around me that this is me. Each and every person beyond this fence is actually apart from me. This resistance is very big, and therefore resistance means, see, it can be understood with reference to a person who is overtly egoistic. Each and every time there is a constant emphasis of this, I am doing everything, I am big, this sort of. People don't feel like going and mingling with that person in general. It's that everybody has this feeling. It's only a matter of question of whether it is high or low. Each and every one of us have this individuality. But that moment that individuality becomes more and more pronounced, you will find that there will not be a very natural inclination towards mingling with that person. On the other hand, you take the example of even, let's say you have a boss who is very egoistic. Constantly he is asserting himself and putting down others. There's that each and every employee around him is not really very comfortable with him. Okay, but you have to set aside everything and you have to work under him, because that is the relationship in the office that you have with him. But for some reason, for some official reason also, you go to his home, you do it just as a mechanical duty. There's no feeling or anything like that. But imagine, when you have gone to his house, he has a very young child. The emotion that you have for the boss does not get transferred to the child. You are able to feel, fondle the child and feel one with the child or play with the child, irrespective of whose child it is, right? It could be even a servant's child who is there or the boss child who is there. What causes that natural change in tendency in you? What is it here?
Ego.
Of
The child.
the child doesn't have ego. The moment the child doesn't have an ego, there is an automatic, the fence is broken. When we say child doesn't have ego, it is in its pure form now. I mean, when it grows into adult, it will develop ego. So in that state, there is an automatic attraction there. So whenever there is no ego, even temporarily, as Swamiji says in every lecture, when a person is highly drunk, even that same boss, if he is highly drunk and he has fallen on the road, you will set aside all differences and you would want to help him at that point of time. Why is he attracting at that point of time, though you have an inherent hatred or something other feeling towards him? Because at that point of time, he is not himself. At that point of time, all his ego is gone. Temporarily, it's gone. He is a different person, meaning he is not his own self. So the moment ego is not there, there is an attraction. It really pulls other people towards you. Meaning, there is a vacuum that is created by which the world is going to enter you. And how does each and every person react? That is dependent on their ego. But all other things remaining the same, when a person is reducing ego, he is able to pull the world towards him. So when the ego is maximum, there is a resistance between the microcosm and the macrocosm. As you gain the knowledge, perform karma and other sadhanas that you do, the ego reduces. Individual is here, same, ego is reducing here. And it comes to a point where the ego is almost zero. Virtually non-existent. It is at this point that you are able to see others in yourself and yourself in others. Absolutely no ego for that person. There is no differentiation in the entity at all. And when the microcosm and macrocosm merge, you become the center of it. This is absolute enlightenment. Both these triangles merge here. Now the question is, how does this identification happen with others? As long as our focus and attention is on our body, we view everything in the world very physically. We view it only from physical point of view. Each and everything is only just physical. Nothing else. Whenever you focus on other persons, your constant thought, gossips, speech, it's all related to body or the material joys which are associated with the body. What is the weight of that person? What is this? And this is the constant focus that we will be caught up in as long as the attention is of physical body, because I am considering myself to the body as my body. So I am viewing others also as their bodies only. So the whole visualization of the world is from a physical point of view. When I get little deeper into my personality and identify with my emotions, then the whole view of the world is from emotional point of view. We visualize everything emotional. That time whether the person is fat or slim, all those things, it's not there. You are able to see that person, whether he is a nice person or how is his emotions. This is what you relate to. And when the joy that we derive out of the emotional level, at the emotional level, is definitely subtler than the physical joy. And rare are the persons who are able to identify with their intellect, and for them the whole visualization of the world is from my intellectual plane. They see everything right and wrong and logical, from this angle. But only when a person is able to identify with the spirit of self within, he is able to see the spirit in everybody. Then he understands it is the same. So Swamiji gives this example that in a lecture, if a person visits for the first time and he sees the speaker, a gross physical person will say that how old is he or how does he look? This is the thought that will be centered around him. If he is an emotional person, he is talking about how nice he is, or he is an angry person, or this type of a feeling. If he is intellectual, he will be weighing whether he is very logical, he is very intellectual, or he is not logical, this type of a thought. When he is spiritual, only then you will approach that lecture as to what is it that he is saying which is useful for my self-development. That's all. That will be the relationship. So the moment you are able to identify with the spirit within, you are able to identify with the spirit outside. So there is no other means for liberation. He lays it very emphatically here to say that knowledge of the self that he talked about in the previous mantra is not a mere knowledge at the intellect alone. Otherwise everybody knows. In the very first class they all know. that you are the self, I am the self, everybody is the self. What else we need? The knowledge is over. But if you ask where is the knowledge of the self, it is in the book. It is not here. It is just in the book. How does it get converted into our system? Unless otherwise it percolates into the feeling level and your whole personality is filled with that throbbing self. It really doesn't, change anything within us. So there is no other means is actual knowledge is expressed in that feeling. So if you are able to visualize God in any way, whatever way, and you are able to make sure that your feelings are flowing towards Him in a very great manner. I mean, it will automatically flow. It will gain momentum as you travel in the path. Then you will find, even to the stranger, there will be a gush of feeling that it will automatically flow from within you. There is no separate entity that you will see at all. A person who begins to see the Lord, he cannot see anything else at all. There was we gave the story of a great devotee of Shiva who daily goes to the temple across Kaveri and takes the prasad in the dusk time, Sandhya time, in the evening. And this is his regular practice. He was a great devotee of Shiva. One day that there was a flood and he could not cross the river and go, so he was standing on this side, but he was feeling that why he is not able to go, and he was feeling sad about it. As he was about to turn and go away to his home, the priest of the temple came and he said, "Why you come daily? Why have you not come today? Anyway, I brought this prasad," and he gave that vibhuti, that ash. He smeared it and he said thank you and he went. After he went only he realized, if I am not able to cross this river because of the flood, how did the priest cross the river and come here? Then he understood the person who came was not the priest. He understood it was Lord Himself who had come. And he was saying that, oh, how did I miss Him? He has come and I have missed Him. From that time onwards, whoever he saw, first he sees very carefully that this is him only. So in the process, his whole vision changed, that he began to see God in each and every being. This is a transformational vision in him. This sort of a thing. So therefore, see, that attitude is, with all this lecture also, when you go and suppose your car is parked here, a dog comes, immediately you pick up a stone and first hit it, What is this dog doing to my car, or coming? Why is it coming in? Or a crow that is sitting. You don't see the crow as Krishna. You don't see crow as Rama or something like. It doesn't happen. It is just another cockroach. I'm not saying that you encourage cockroach in your house. That's not the thing. Whether it is a mosquito or a cockroach or any being for that matter, immediate thing comes as to how to. It is creating something which is a disturbance for me. And the same feeling extends with reference to other human beings also. That is why in the 12th chapter he says Adveshta Sarva Bhutana. Not showing hatred to any being is the quality of a real bhakta. So therefore, we have to work on this. So the test of all the knowledge that we gain in Vedanta and classes like this or your own sadhana is not that how much lectures that we can take, how many questions that we can answer, or how many applause that we get, or quotations here and there that we can do. The test is this, that you are able to feel one with others. That is the test. Gita says, what is that verse in 12th chapter? Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. A person who is happy with the welfare of all beings. That is the test. Irrespective of each and every person, what karma they go through, we are first of all happy the moment the other person is, he is arrested. He deserves it. Whether he is arrested or not, whether he goes through his karma, that, as I said, that is his this thing. But what is your first reaction? What is your first feeling that comes? It is that we are happy at the fall of others. It has to happen like this. I knew it. This sort of a thing we have. But if you are able to genuinely forget about even a downfall of others, how you deal with it. It is very difficult to cope with the pleasure of others. You saw in the Three Idiots movie, these three were the friends, right? The hero and his two friends. So in the first examination, the other two persons get the last 2 marks, and their numbers are there in the list in the very final 2 positions, and they are searching for this Amir Khan's marks, and his name is not there at all. So they are for a moment shocked, and then they saw he is in the separate list where he is the first. Then he says, when a friend fails, it is painful, but when a friend succeeds, it is more painful, he says. He is talking about a very natural feeling that he gets. It is tough to deal with the success of others, actually. It is very tough. At least in failure, there is a very benevolent ego that comes in and says, don't worry, I'm there, all these things we do. A sort of a positive feeling comes. But when it comes to the success of others, it becomes very difficult to handle. Imagine if a neighbor buys the Mercedes car and you are throwing party for it, that is the day Swamiji says that you have learned some Vedanta. Something like that. If you are able to feel others' joy as your joy, if genuinely, again it is a practice also, but it is a very spontaneous way by which it comes, that you are able to genuinely feel the sorrow of others as your own. And when you are able to feel others' joy as your own, so then where is the problem at all? This sort of a thing. Namadev, the great saint of Maharashtra, he says in one of his songs, where probably his wife feels for a while that she is also a great saint, Namadev's wife, Rajai. So she expresses her not having some funds or something to others, and Namadev comes to know about it, and he says, why do you say this? We have got everything. Actually, our financier is Kubera only. Our father is Panduranga, our mother is Rukmani, our financier, our treasurer is Kubera. What is it that we are lacking? So whatever we want, it is provided. So in other words, only when the money or the treasure is in my name, that it belongs to me is what my feeling is. When it is with others, I don't feel it is my money. So therefore there is a want, whether I want to become like you or I want to take from you, all those things comes. But he says the universal wealth is my wealth and my treasurer is Kubera. So what is the issue there? We are already rich and whatever is required for us is always provided from time to time. This is sort of the identification. That is why in the Ishavasya he says, Ma Grida Kasya Svidhanam. For whose wealth it is? There is no question of my or others there. So that when that barrier is completely broken, it is, the ego is completely demolished. You are able to feel one with others. In the small note of Vedanta and socialism, Swami Ramtirtha writes a very beautiful thought. In fact, socialism, capitalism, these are where the thoughts that were getting founded and stronger at the beginning of 20th century. And he was a very great visionary and he understood immediately what it is. In fact, his thoughts about capitalism and all is not available because it is said that based on certain lawyers' opinion, the Ramtirtha Pratishthan has not published it. Whatever he has written, we don't know. But a small note on, he compares each and every aspect with reference to the highest thought of Vedanta, and from the point of self only he deals everything. But it's very logical. His clarity is amazing. He deals with hypnotism, he deals with various other things also, only from Vedantic point of view and the highest point of view of self. So he's talking about socialism where there is a collective ownership. There's no individual possession. That is the main thought. He says, why should there be an authority which says that you must possess this much and he must possess this much? In other words, it is actually trying to take out your possession away, make it into a common pool of stock and distribute equally so that each and everybody is equal. This sort of a Siddhant is what they brought in, which is not a natural philosophy. It is not a natural way of thinking. That's what we have seen within not even 70 years. It has collapsed. It is very clear. But he says, if at all that thought of equality is there, that idea of real socialism is there, he says Vedanta is the real socialism. Which is saying, irrespective of whatever possessions you have, you take away the thought of possessiveness from the possession. How does it matter then if a person has a little more or little less? So then what happens? Automatically, as you are having certain things under your physical control, there is no mental control over it at all. So each and every person, whether he is from the worldly point of view rich or poor, is actually feeling equal. There is absolutely no sense of possessiveness. So in fact, therefore, if you are able to instill this Vedantic thought, you will achieve real socialism, he says. So this is what it is. Irrespective of whatever we are, if we are able to universalize our emotions through the feeling of love, then your wealth is my wealth, your joy is my joy, your sorrow is my sorrow, everything about yours is actually mine. So there is no question of me having a separate entity and others having a separate entity at all. So that is the universal feeling that he is talking about. And this universal feeling can take you to the stage of realization. This is the only way. Unless otherwise you are able to swallow everything by this unconditional love, there is no other means for liberation. So in this third figure, the ego is as good as zero. In the fourth figure, the ego is completely zero. That is the only difference. So that means infinity is absolutely attained here. So this is gaining of knowledge of the self. One step before gaining of the knowledge of the self is swallowing everything into yourself by feeling one with the others. So it is reconciled that there is no other means. By feeling, you are actually entering through the gates of realization where the knowledge of the self opens up to you. By perceiving the self in all beings and all beings in the self, one reaches the Supreme Brahman not by other means. Yes, sir.
Two questions. So one is, in practical life, if we follow this mantra in a way that you treat others the way you would like to be treated, it makes it very simple.
Right. If you do it.
Yeah. But then it sort of your understanding becomes more clear that we should follow that basic principle.
Right.
And so the second question, little more complex, which my understanding is it easier for others to feel part of you than you to feel part of others? Because the risk of you feeling, I mean, it's way ahead, I'm just trying to understand it. The risk of you feeling part of others, that fine line between ego and self-respect may also be broken. Because while you obviously have to dissolve the ego, but you still have to maintain the self-respect. So the moment you start feeling yourself be part of others, is that risk is there?
No, I would say that first you try to define and understand what that self-respect is. What is self-respect?
I mean, that is where the confusion goes. It's a very fine line between ego and self-respect. At times we consider self-respect, ego to be self-respect. So that is again a matter of...
So that's what I am saying. We are using the term self-respect and we try to sort of, I wouldn't use the word justify, but we give a positive spin to that word self-respect, etc. But I'm saying try to go deeper and to try to understand what is self-respect. When you say self-respect, suppose your car enters the hotel and you see that the Darwan who is standing there in the hotel gate, he salutes every other car that is in front of you, and when you go, he has not saluted. Would you take it as your self-respect being disrespected?
No, that's not.
Why?
Because that is his way of understanding that the one felt as somebody is more important.
So then give other example where your self-respect is more important.
So in this example, suppose I when I'm feeling others to be part of me, and I'm taking one extra step to help that person, help may not be the right person for them, right word, because when you're feeling same, then there's no question of help. But just for understanding, I'm using that word. But when it comes to you being part of others, then that you start wondering whether that helps, or again the word help should we take it up. So that is where self-respect and ego comes.
Correct. Now tell me, if the other person is in the stage where he is able to really understand and reciprocate, probably he will not even require your help. See, suppose you are trying to help your child, okay? In fact, you are trying to, teach it proper way of brushing the teeth or whatever it is, and it is resisting, and the child is resisting, and in that process it even shouts or abuses you, etc. Do you feel that your self-respect is gone? Why?
Well, he's part of you.
That's what it is. The moment you are able to feel one with the child, irrespective of whatever it is doing at the level the child is, based on its level of knowledge or ignorance, you are able to clearly forgive and get ahead and not feel any sort of hatred or resistance towards that entity, because you understand that you and child are one and the same. It is part of you, as you said. Part of you means it is you only. See, when this part of you and all we use as a term, it is basically you feel that identification with the child. And in case of a child, it is very clear because it's a very natural bonding that it comes. The child is you, your wife is you, all this circle of identification is clear because this is the area that we operate. Now, with reference to, let's say, your office, a person is, you teach him, you patiently tell him this is how it should be done, etc. But he is still not able to understand it. He is doing mistake after mistake. And third time you completely shout and fire and, finish him off completely. And, why are you not able to treat him like how you would treat a child? Because at some point of time, that identification of who is me, wherever there is a elasticity limit, it breaks. So that is the time all these other emotions come. Now, I am not saying that you must not run the office efficiently, etc. You cannot, I am not saying that you have to keep on tolerating inefficiency with reference to things. But where does that line comes is this. Self-respect in a positive way when you use, if you are able to place the value upon a goal or an ideal, again which is beyond your ego and egocentric notions, where there is a disrespect towards that, where there is a not a favorable relationship with reference to that, you are able to say no. There you are maintaining self-respect. In other words, at the personal level, to any extent you can sort of do to dissolve your ego. You can go to any extent to bend yourself to dissolve your ego. See, suppose Swami Ramtirtha gives an example. A person is there to whom everything in the life is conducive. He has good wealth and he has got good relatives and he is a kind-hearted person. Everything about him is nice, good wife and knowledge, everything he has. Only thing is, he has got a servant who is constantly abusive. Not just abusive, he doesn't respect the master also. If he says some work to be done, even in front of others, I'll do it later, This sort of arrogant reply he gives, he doesn't respect. He is actually the servant and he is the master, but he doesn't consider that way. Maybe because his father served or his grandfather served, he is continuously serving in the family, he is being there. But others are saying, with all the resources that you have and everything is okay for you, why don't you just get rid of this person? He is so arrogant and others are feeling awkward. Others are feeling very bad about his behavior. This person says, the servant is the only person who keeps on testing my tolerance, my spiritual evolution as it is. If this person was not there in my vicinity, everything is smooth and you will feel that everything is going very great and good about you. You don't have a chance to test yourself. Okay. So, in real life incident, Swamiji talks about a particular Swami who went to Himalayas at a very young age, and he was always there in the satsang where everybody used to greet everybody as Hari Om and nice words and everything. They talked Upanishads, Gita, everything, which is fine. And he probably that also has changed his personality to an extent. But there was never a chance to test himself in an adverse condition. So after very many years, he went to his hometown. He wanted to go to Kerala. So he went to Delhi to take train, and he picked up a very bad fight with the porter. And all his pent up emotions, everything came. So what it means is, it is not that he did not evolve or anything, but there was no chance for him to test his ego or other levels of his evolution in a conducive atmosphere where everything was fine. Here it was like that. Exactly like that. If in any situation, if a chance is there, when I say chance, if the opportunity or the atmosphere or the situation is in such a way that it hurts your ego, and if it is something personal to you, I would say you can go to any extent to tolerate it. There is absolutely no question of respect or anything. See, for example, I am saying, if the abusive boss in the office shouts at you, you are the employee, he is the employer, he is the boss, and you are working under him. This you have taken as the contract. And he is of very abusive nature. For no fault of yours, he is just shouting in front of others. And that is the time actually anger gurgles within you. Okay, how can he do like this? And just because he is abusing his position, he is abusing his... And so what will you do? How will you deal with that situation?
Just observe, mom.
You will keep mum. Right? Any other person with any other reaction?
So actually in practical life, it will depend on whether you need the boss or not.
Yeah.
If you can get a different job, you will probably say, listen, go to hell, man, I'm taking a different job.
Right. If you don't...
Practical life, that is going to happen.
If you are not sure of getting a different job...
But the moment I think where you are coming from is that if I think that, okay, if I quit this job out of anger or out of ego, my family will get hurt or my largest goal of life will get hurt, then I will kind of tolerate it. So then, again, the higher...
But tell me, all this thinking happens in the class when I am asking a question.
doesn't happen.
When the boss is actually shouting at you, at that point what?
Go and abuse him back.
Yeah, if you say beyond a point, you want to give one back to him,
Exactly.
and you say you hell with your job, and maybe in the fit of emotion you even write a resignation letter, throw on his face and come, and you search for the job for the next 6 months. Then that can independently happen. But if this can happen,
Instant reaction.
the instant reaction, it is all based probably. We are not that much object. Suppose if he abuses only one word, you are able to take. If he is abusing for 5 minutes, somehow you are tolerating. He is keeping on shouting and it becomes too much, then you do. So various levels according to each person's elasticity limit, this happens. But I am saying, imagine if you are at the absolute level like Vivekananda or a Paramahamsa, but still you are doing that job. Assume that. Okay. If Paramahamsa was there in that job and the person is abusing, how will his reaction be? Never can it touch him at all. Never. Like it is not the water that is being poured in a sponge. It is the water that is poured in a metal or something which will never get into it. Right? Such a person, so suppose if you are able to, or at least what maximum you can do is drink a cold glass of water at that point of time and cool yourself inside, because after 5 minutes, everything is going to be normal. This ritual he has to do once a month, he will do. And in this process, actually, after everything is settled down, okay, you can independently take a survey of all the people who are there in the office also. What did you exactly think about the situation or the boss or about me when he was shouting? When the boss was shouting for that 5 minutes, everybody was silent. Either they were pretending to do the job or they were cursing inside. They were doing something. You go and ask him, what will be the reaction? what will they think?
Boss doesn't know how to behave himself. It's not a good
He doesn't know how to behave himself. Okay. So in the whole process, who has lost self-respect? The boss. Because of his behavior, because of his, that's his nature. And everybody has understood his nature. In fact, you also understand his nature. Nothing else. You understand his nature. But at that point of time, you are not able to reconcile and come to terms with the thing that he is shouting at me. Because your ego is there. So you say that he is shouting at me and there is a self-respect for me. That's a self-respect. I don't want to continue in the job at the cost of self-respect. But tell me, is your self-respect gone?
No.
Your self-respect is not gone. It is your imagination that your self-respect is gone. So most of the people, when they use this self-respect, they are not using it as in the spirit or the right way in which it is to be understood. Okay. Now what I am trying to say is, if you are able to place the value, that this value that you have put on your ego, you place it on something apart from your ego somewhere else. Okay. Suppose you place it on your master. You place it on God. You place it on Vedanta. Suppose he is abusing you are asking at the year end we do this yajna and we ask for donations. Okay. To conduct this event. And I say that you also try to collect from your office. So he is capable of giving, let's say he has resources and funds to give. And you are asking money for a cause to conduct Bhagavad Gita lecture or something. Again he is abusing everything. Not you. He is abusing Bhagavad Gita. He says this Swami is fraud, this is fraud, and Gita itself is a very fake philosophy. All these things, suppose he abuses, and finally he writes a check or something and throws. You need not accept that. You understand? There is nothing like your self-respect or anything. The value that you place on the goal or the ideal, which is something beyond you, if there is a distortion of that, if there is a abuse of that, if there is a disrespect of that you need not accept. Here also what happens is that if you are able to place like that, automatically your personal reaction to that will be equally subdued, because the moment you start operating for the higher, at the personal level you will be able to automatically even it out. So you will say, no sir, thank you, and you will come out. Even here, if you have attachment towards the cause, attachment towards the Guru, there will be anger or other thing, but that will be there. But you need not accept this. That's about all. So if you are able to keep that value something beyond you, if you are able to uphold that respect, which is good enough. Otherwise, there is no such thing as self-respect. Suppose he has the same personal agenda against you and he is shouting at you, but he is convinced about the cause. He is writing a check and he is giving. You keep quiet and take the check and come. That's perfectly okay. As long as your personal thing that's so. In fact, self-respect is a term that we use in a way which is a substitute for our own justification of ego only. So that need not be the case in any point. So to the extent, whichever extent we can go, because the whole idea of Vedanta is to dissolve the ego. So he is putting an extreme test for you. Just try to cross over it. That must be the spirit in which we have to.
So one more question. So you said that your feeling need not be at action level. You may feel, there can be feeling of oneness, but when it comes to action, you have to do your action. It's like Arjuna killing Bhishma.
Correct. Absolutely.
Exactly what. But again, if you can kindly elaborate, because that is again a challenge where feeling and action, they don't work together.
See,
they end up working together.
The thought at the intellectual level percolates as the feeling at the emotional level, and it percolates as the action at the physical level. In other words, it will be all in the same line only. You think one, then you feel one, automatically you will do service there. The moment you feel one with others, you will want to do everything for others. Now, in the case with reference to where you have to do the action, where you are again feeling one with that ideal or goal. Your thought is dharma, and whatever is the thought of dharma, according to which you are going to execute the action here. Here the action is killing others, which is in the form of a dharma yuddha, in the war that you are doing. It so happens that in the war, that opposite person is your relative also. So therefore, from the duty point of view, you are able to set aside the emotions and do whatever has to be done. So the feeling for dharma is one, feeling for my grandfather is one. Out of this, which will finally will win or should win is your feeling for the higher. So there's no contradiction. Yes, sir.
So, getting a vision, unified vision from that, Lord says, no, if I say that they are in me, okay, and then I am in them. But in Gita, Lord says they are in me, I am not in them, and I am in them, but they are not in me. Can that thing be equated here?
No, that's a completely different context. In fact, where he is talking about a totally, what is the relation with reference to Brahman and the Prakriti in chapter 9 that you are talking about, in verses 4 and 5 it comes. Krishna confuses and finally gives absolute clarity there. That's a different thing altogether. So here the right verse is chapter 6 verse 29. That they are in me, I am in them. He is talking about from the point of view of absolute Brahman here. Here he is talking about a individual path towards the self-realization. So they are completely two different things. Where he uses I and where this Bhutastam Atmanam, where he is talking about a sadhana from individual point of view, totally different context there.
This process of seeing self in the others, is it an intellectual process? It is it's through negation and assertion.
Negation and assertion is coming in the next verse. So here it is the process of the internal feeling only, as it is. It is absolutely talking about at the feeling level. But that, as I said, the feeling which being spontaneous is kindled by the thought. So it originates from the knowledge. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
Mukunda Ananda Govinda
पूर्णमिदम् पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते